Black metal is one of the most inflammatory subgenres of metal. It rose to prominence in countries like Norway, Sweden, and Finland in the 90s. It commonly features purposefully low-quality production, high-pitched scream vocals, blast beats, and dissonant tremolo-pick guitar riffs. Black metal can be compared to the likes of death metal or thrash metal in many ways, in that it can have that same aggression and speed to the sound. It differs in a number of key areas, however. Black metal places a focus on atmosphere and emotion that you don't see much in death or thrash metal, and it rebels against traditional recording techniques. What I'm describing isn't the original black metal, though. I'm talking about the second wave of black metal, the most well-known time of development and media coverage in the history of the subgenre. To cover all the history, we'll have to go back to the late 70s and early 80s with bands like Celtic Frost, Merciful Fate, and of course, Bathory and Venom. In the late 70s and on into the 80s, metal was in the middle of a rapid growth period which saw the formation of many different subgenres. Black metal, as well as thrash metal, death metal, glam metal, and others all trace their origins back to this period. Black metal takes influence from many of the bands that were experimenting during this time and built upon what they created to form the genre as we know it today. Celtic Frost formed in 1984 from the ashes of another proto-black metal outfit named Hellhammer, and was an important figure in the first wave of black metal. They released their first album, To Megatherion, in 1985 and continued contributing to the sound of what would become black metal until they broke up in 1993. They reformed in 2001 and went on to make music until breaking up again in 2008, releasing a total of 5 full-length albums. Celtic Frost, like many of their contemporaries, brought a level of darkness to their lyrics that wasn't common at the time, cementing the idea of the type of lyrics you could expect in a black metal song. Next up, we have Merciful Fate. Now, Merciful Fate is not who you might expect someone to bring up in regards to black metal, but they definitely contributed to the lyricism and vocals of black metal. Formed in 1981 by Kim Bendix Peterson, better known by his stage name King Diamond, and his friend Hank Sherman, Merciful Fate and later King Diamond featured the falsetto shrieks of King Diamond, which were combined with occult and often satanic lyrics to create a sound that was wholly unique at the time, and this was one of the pillars upon which the second wave of black metal was founded. Albums like Melissa and Don't Break the Oath are milestones in the formation of second wave black metal. The band can also be credited as one of the originators of corpse paint, a practice which would become common in the second wave, due to the makeup worn by King Diamond during live performances. Merciful Fate has released 9 full-length albums during their career, and was initially active from 1981 to 1985. It was revived in 1992 and went on till 1999. Merciful Fate was revived most recently in 2009, though King Diamond himself mostly works with his band of the same name. Bathory was one of the closest in terms of sound to the second wave. Like their contemporaries, Bathory had strongly occult and dark lyrics. They also had a very raw style. The biggest contribution Bathory gave to black metal was the fact that it was all done by one person. Ace Forsberg, better known as Korthon, wrote and recorded all of Bathory's music across their 21-year career. This began the tradition of one-man black metal bands that survives today. Formed in 1983 by Korthon, Bathory released 12 full-length albums. Sadly, Bathory ended with Korthon's death in 2004 at the age of just 38. Venom is one of the biggest names in the first wave of black metal. While technically part of the new wave of British heavy metal at their inception, Venom, like Bathory, featured a particularly raw, visceral style and low-fidelity recordings that would go on to be staples in future black metal. Like Merciful Fate, their lyrics dealt primarily with occultism and satanic imagery, but it was their style that set them apart from other bands of the time. They were amongst the first to adopt the pentagram as their symbol and integrated it into their album covers. In addition to the low-fidelity recordings, raw style, and satanic imagery, Venom are notable for their second album, Black Metal, which is considered by many to be the album that gave the genre its name. Venom is one of the longest surviving black metal bands, having formed in 1979 and surviving off and on to this day. They've recorded a total of 14 full-length albums. By this point, the stage was set for the second wave of black metal. All they needed was somebody to carry the torch, someone to continue with what they created and take it to the next level. Enter Mayhem. Mayhem is the father of the second wave of black metal, formed in 1984 by Oyston RSF, better known as Euronymous. They released a handful of demos before releasing their first EP, Death Crush, in 1987. Death Crush featured misanthropic, dark, and occult lyrics, an extremely raw style, and screamed vocals. With that EP, Mayhem cemented the style of black metal, and the second wave was ready to begin. Along with Mayhem, the second wave featured bands such as Burzum, Dark Throne, Emperor, Dimmu Borgir, Immortal, and many others. Burzum, like Bathory, is a one-man band headed up by Varg Vikernes, and though the band fell under the shadow of the crimes committed by Varg, their early albums were extremely influential in second-wave black metal. Dark Throne is another band where a small number of people write and record all the music. In this case with only two people. Gylve Nagel and Ted Skellum, better known as Fenriz and Nocturno Culto respectively, have handled every aspect of Dark Throne since their third album. Starting off as a death metal band, Dark Throne changed their style to black metal after Nocturno Culto and Fenriz developed an interest in it. This would not be their last stylistic change. Dark Throne is known for playing whatever the hell they feel like, and have played death metal, black metal, crust punk, and a few other genres over the course of their career. Emperor formed in 1991 with Vegard Tveiten, better known as Isan, Thomas Hagen, aka Semoth, sometimes Semet, and Bard Ethan, aka Faust. Releasing only 4 full-length albums over their career, Emperor is one of the least prolific bands of the second wave, but their use of symphonic elements was influential to the creation of symphonic black metal. Dimmu Borgir can also be credited with influencing symphonic black metal, maybe even more so than Emperor. Formed in 1993 by members Stian Shagra Thorsen and Sven Silenos Kaparad, Dimmu Borgir has featured symphonic elements in every one of their albums, and has occasionally featured a full orchestra. Though many don't consider Dimmu Borgir to be black metal anymore, their early albums had an undeniable influence on what came after, and their most recent work built up symphonic metal as a subgenre of black metal. Immortal was formed by Olve Aikemo, better known as Abeth Doom Occulta, and Harold Demonaz Knivedal in 1991. Unlike Dimmu Borgir, Immortal plays much more traditional second-wave black metal. Abeth has credited Euronymous of Mayhem with introducing him to black metal. Abeth would later go on to introduce Varg to the genre, an event which ended in tragedy. But in order to understand that tragedy, and the other crimes that surrounded the second wave of black metal, we'll have to take a look at the events that led up to them. Mayhem was at the center of the second wave movement, and have cultivated an image of darkness, and surrounded themselves in mystery. Dark and off-putting stories abound with this band, most of which revolve around their most enigmatic member, Per Olin, better known by his stage name, Dead. Rumors circulated that Dead would bury his clothes and dig them up before a gig, or that he kept the corpse of a crow in a bag and would inhale its scent so that he could perform with the scent of death in his nostrils. Dead is also credited as the first black metal musician to wear true corpse paint. While bands like Merciful Fate and Kiss wore makeup, and were undoubtedly part of the inspiration behind corpse paint, Dead took the idea a step further and was the first to wear makeup in order to look like a decomposing body, hence the name corpse paint. Dead is also a key figure in one of the darker stories associated with black metal. On April 8, 1991, guitarist Euronymous found Dead's corpse inside the house the band shared. Dead had committed suicide via shotgun blast to the head. Instead of calling the authorities, however, Euronymous arranged Dead's corpse along with a knife and the shotgun he used to kill himself into a more pleasing arrangement, and snapped a picture. This picture was then used for the cover of Mayhem's live album, Dawn of the Black Hearts. It's also rumored that Euronymous took fragments of Dead's skull and made them into necklaces, and that he cooked and ate parts of Dead's brain. For all the influence Dead had on the imagery of black metal, Euronymous is the person responsible for its development as an underground scene in the 90s. He opened the first black metal record store, Helvet, which translates to hell in English. In the early 90s, it was a gathering place for many second-wave artists. Euronymous became the figurehead of second-wave black metal, and started a group for the elite second-wavers called the Inner Circle or the Black Circle. While Euronymous himself never took part in any church burnings, members of the Inner Circle ended up causing a lot of the chaos that surrounded black metal in the 90s. Amongst members of the Inner Circle were members of bands Emperor and Immortal, as well as Varg of Burzum. They were responsible for many of the church burnings that took place in the 90s. Inner Circle members Samuth and Faust of Emperor, as well as Jorn Inge Turnsberg of Immortal, were found guilty of arson. Varg was convicted of the arsons of Holmenkollen Chapel, Skjold Church, and Assen Church. These are not, however, his most famous crime. No, Varg is most well known for murder. On the 10th of August in 1993, Varg and Snorre Blackthorn Rush of Thorns drove to Euronymous' apartment in Oslo to discuss a contract for the release of Burzum Records through Euronymous' label. Prior to this, Euronymous had told those close to him that he planned to take Varg into the woods and make a snuff film of torturing him to death. Varg states that he believed Euronymous to be serious in his claims because he kept this plan closely guarded and told only his most trusted friends and allies what he was plotting. Varg also claims that Euronymous had said that he planned on using this meeting to ambush him using a stun gun that he had shown off in the past. He has said that he planned to hand Euronymous the signed contract that night and tell him to fuck off, but that Euronymous panicked and attacked him first, though members of the scene doubt this story. Varg and Snorre arrived at Euronymous' apartment in the early hours of the morning. Shortly after their arrival, a confrontation broke out that ended in Varg stabbing Euronymous to death. Euronymous' body was found to have been stabbed 23 times, 2 to the head, 5 in the neck, and 16 in his back. In May 1994, Varg was convicted of the murder of Euronymous and sentenced to 21 years in prison, the most harsh penalty Norway has. Snorri received 8 years for being accomplice to the murder, though Varg says he had nothing to do with the actual crime. Varg's murder of Euronymous isn't the only murder to come from the second wave black metal scene in the 90s. Faust of Emperor was convicted of fatally stabbing Magne Andresen in 1992, near the park which would hold the 1994 Olympic Games. Faust ran into Magne in the Olympic Park after drinking in a pub. He said of the event, "This man approached me. He was obviously drunk and obviously gay. It was obvious that he wanted some contact. Then he asked me if we could go into the woods, so I agreed, because already then I had decided that I wanted to kill him, which was very weird because I'm not like this." Faust would go with him into the woods, where he stabbed Magna 37 times and stomped his head as he lay on the ground. These are the events that garnered black metal the most attention in the media, and they're the things that people tend to think of first when they hear the name black metal. But many bands and musicians that formed during this time had nothing to do with any of the crimes committed by their contemporaries. Emperor's frontman Ishan had nothing to do with the crimes of his bandmates. Darkthrone in their entirety have never had any run-ins with the law, and in fact their drummer Fenriz was recently elected to city council. Similarly, Dimmu Borgir have never had any issues with law enforcement. With the death of Euronymous and the imprisonment of Varg and Faust, the second wave of black metal was coming to an end. But of course black metal doesn't end there. The genre lives on to this day and is currently in its third wave. The third wave of black metal is marked by musical exploration and has spawned a number of subgenres, such as atmospheric black metal, depressive suicidal black metal, blackened death metal, and the aforementioned symphonic black metal, along with many others. Although it may be past its media heyday, black metal is still growing and evolving as a genre and shows no signs of slowing down. From the early days of Venom and Bathory, to the violence associated with the second wave, to the exploration and expansion the genre is seeing today, black metal has become a staple of heavy metal culture and has earned its place in the halls of heavy metal history.